So today, we're here to talk about another zombie game. It feels like we can't go 6 months without some type of game involving zombies. That being said, there's a wide array of styles of games when it comes to zombie games. Whether it's something story-driven like Days Gone, a more arcade-style thing like Back 4 Blood, or something like this game or Dying Light, well, each has its own style and borrow from each other and place ideas from one type of game to the other. Dead Island 2 is mostly similar to Dying Light. So, for the majority of this review, I'm going to be comparing it to Dying Light as well as the previous entries in Dead Island. That being said, let's go ahead and break down each segment of the game and how they ultimately come together in the end. Now, this video is going to contain spoilers for both story and gameplay elements. This game has been out long enough to where if you're playing this and only this and you really care about spoilers, you could have gotten through the game by now. So if you don't want to see spoilers, go ahead and skip around, especially through this first section, just to the stuff you want to see. There will be segmented parts in the video, so you can skip to specific sections if you want. If you want to just wait completely, finish up the game, and then come back, that's fine too. Perhaps the biggest problem with Dead Island 2 is the story, or rather a lack of one. While I don't expect a fully fleshed out blockbuster level plot in a game about a zombie outbreak, I expect something. In Dead Island 2's roughly 16-hour runtime, 90% of the plot happens in the last 4 hours. The majority of the game is spent infected, trying to find your way to a doctor that can make a cure from your immune blood. Now, if you choose to solely follow the story, only doing main missions, this will take you from region to region across LA until you meet the doctor. You'll meet some side characters here and there, but ultimately they aren't that important until you get, again, to those final 4 hours. This is where the story actually begins to develop, the tiniest bit only to be ended as soon as it begins. In the least confusing way possible, let me attempt to summarize the plot from those final 4 hours where most of the plot actually happens. You discover that instead of making a cure, this doctor actually started the outbreak in a contained setting of the state of California in order to find the next step in human evolution. The zombie plague is like this extinction level event that was always going to happen. It was within us, dormant, and it was always going to end the human race. The doctor was trying to find a way to preemptively start the outbreak on a controlled scale to find the cure. And now that doesn't sound like an awful plot. This reveal was more than halfway through the game. It was, like I said, in the final 4 hours. And this is the entire plot. From there, I'll continue on just for the sake of making my point. As a safety measure, he injects his own daughter with the cure so that he always has some source of cure in case things go wrong and he can, stop this outbreak experiment that he produced. After you discover all of this, the doctor dies. You use the only cure available to cure a guy from the first couple of Dead Island games, and then the daughter, who has the cure in her blood, it runs off and is nowhere to be found. Now, again, this would be fine if this was halfway through the game or like a big rising conflict or like a middle section, but no, this is quite literally how the game ends. On a cliffhanger where the cure to solve all of your problems just runs away, and that's it. Again, I wasn't expecting an incredible story from a zombie game, but something more than this would have been nice. The story ultimately feels like an afterthought tacked on to the gameplay and the locations and all of the other systems in the end. I mean, Dying Light 2 didn't have the greatest story ever, but there was a story and ideas and characters and plot that carried throughout the course of the game. Again, it wasn't incredibly good, but there was something there. Here, you get infected at the beginning, you just kill zombies, and then at the very end, they throw some plot in there. There could have been more here that would have made this a lot more enjoyable. It would have kept you fighting through those waves of zombies. Let's discuss what is arguably the most important part of the game, and that's what you'll actually be doing throughout the entire runtime. To no surprise, a majority of the gameplay consists of fighting hordes of zombies, collecting materials to upgrade your weapons, as well as finding and crafting new ones. Now, you can get these parts from defeating enemies and completing quests, as well with points of interest around the map. Aside from the main missions, you will spend most of your time doing side missions or missing person missions. Side missions work exactly how you expect, doing favors for those in the world for rewards like money or weapons or crafting blueprints, things of that nature. Missing person missions are the bane of my existence. The game will give you a relative location or region in which the person is located, and you have to use clues in the journal to find them. Now, this would be fine as these are optional side missions, but they're close to impossible to complete due to the nature of the zombies throughout the world. You are constantly being attacked and have no opportunity to read or look through your journal and find the clues that you need to find in order to find the missing person, making these missions just completely unbearable. Finally, there's open world points of interest, mainly fuse rooms. So you're going to have these question marks on your map, and these boil down to either points of interest like workbenches and vendors, and things like that, or what I like to call fuse rooms. These are hidden loot rooms that require obviously a fuse that you can either find or buy from vendors to access and solve a little elemental puzzle in order to get the loot in. These most of the time have the best loot and resources for crafting and are worth going to when you need a weapon upgrade. Like other games in this genre, there are zombie classes including suiciders, runners, brutes, some new interesting ones that I won't spoiler if I don't have to, and a couple others. The more difficult zombie types progressively show up more often as you get further into the game, as well as your weapon strength and modding ability in the weapons you get. Mods consist of things like strength, durability, elemental effects for your weapons, lightning, fire, toxicity, the knockback effect, the stun effect, all of those typical types of modding stuff. Now, interestingly, what this game does uniquely is that zombies can also have those same elemental effects as well, which can negate your mods on your weapon, causing the player to come up with unique ideas to solve problems. It's not anything insane, but it's something different. For example, if you have a lightning zombie that has the ability to, shoot lightning out for some of the more heavier boss types, or the grunt types, which just sporadically shoot lightning out of them. They could be standing in a puddle, which will electrify you. But the better example is if you're using a lightning weapon against a lightning zombie, they will be immune and you will do no damage having to use a gun or a different type of weapon. They could have chain and barbed wire wrapped around them, then you can't do blunt damage or damage with your weapon, you have to use explosives. They could have fire, and you get my point. They have elemental effects on the zombies that go with the weapons that at least add something new and unique that you haven't seen before when it comes to this whole weapon modding elemental feature. One component of this game that tries to be unique and ultimately fails is how they choose to include a skill tree. So instead of your typical skill tree in which you naturally progress or choose which branch to go down to get different abilities and upgrades, they use skill cards. My problem with this is the player gets no choice in which order they get these abilities, locking the player to the order they receive them. The cards themselves are also not the greatest abilities. I want to say I counted about 56 cards in the game total, and I would estimate about 10 of them are actually useful. These could be things like effects while performing certain attacks, simple upgrades like stat buffs, and all types of different things that for the most part were useless, like a shockwave when you use a med kit, or catching the zombie on fire when you stomp on it. There were a couple that were really good that could keep you alive here and there and, buff or nerf your playstyle, but for the most part, they all felt like little added things that were just tacked on in order to have skill tree or a skill card. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about is character choice as a whole. At the beginning of the game, you get to choose from a handful of characters, each with supposed unique set of stats. While they do offer unique dialogue options for each character and different cutscenes, the actual stat difference in the game is not significant at all and doesn't warrant a second playthrough or really give you any reason to care who you're picking. They show these innate skills, which are these cards that you think would be unique to the character, but one, like you can see here, they aren't that great starting, and two, every character gets every card. So it's not like these cards are unique to Danny, and the cards that this character has is unique to this Amy, and this character has these unique cards. It doesn't work like that. I would have rather there been less cards and them been unique to each character and each character feel like their own playstyle. but instead, that's not the case. While some have higher agility and toughness and stamina and health recovery and damage and all of that stuff, relatively, once you get past that beginning section where that's the only thing that matters are your starting stats, they all feel the same. Now from there, we're going to go ahead and move on to the graphics section. I've talked enough about the gameplay. You know exactly what to expect for the most part. Nothing's really going to surprise you, other than the few things that I mentioned here and there. But let's talk about the visuals of the game. Well, overall, the game is much brighter and more colorful than similar games in the same setting. This comes down to preference. Much like the color tones from Dying Light 1 to its sequel, it's all about preference, right? Dying Light 2 is very bright, Dead Island 2 is very bright, and Dead Island 1 was also very bright. After playing something like Dying Light, the original game, it was a lot of grays and oranges and browns, and that's just what I prefer. I'm not saying this looks bad in any way, but I prefer the darker, more monotone colors for this type of setting. Now, I get what they're going for. It matches the tone with the goofiness and the stupid weapons and the over-the-topness, sure, but again, it's just preference. For the most part, it's exactly what you come to expect from a AAA game, especially one that was delayed for over 10 years. Now, where this game goes above and beyond is the gore. Now, I couldn't decide whether to put this in the gameplay section or the graphics, as it really is a gameplay mechanic. It really just looks absolutely fantastic, so that's why I decided to talk about it here. Zombie games have always been filled with guts and gore and dismemberment, but this game takes it to another level. It takes your typical dismemberment and gore system like something like Dying Light uses, but with the additional years that this game's had in development and just the technology we have available, amps it way, way up. So let me go ahead and start kind of from the beginning to break it down for you. So back in the day, zombie games, the damage was for the most part broken down into segments, right? You could take off the head or damage the arms or damage the legs, take bits and pieces off, but it was segmented to those specific areas. Then from there you have the era of like Dying Light, for example, where I know we've talked about it a lot, but you have the specifically detailed dismemberment. So instead of the legs, the arms, the head, you can now hit them in the shoulder or, the knee and do different types of damage. But for the most part, if you used a gun, it looked like this. If you used a melee weapon, it looked like this. And there were some variations here and there, but the technology just wasn't there yet. This game, though, it's there and it looks absolutely fantastic. You can target specific areas, and within those areas, each individual region can be broken and damaged depending on which weapon type you're using. It seems like it would get boring and old really quickly, but it doesn't. The variety of weapons and different animations and damage you can do makes it fun the whole time. You can do different types of head damage. You can chop into their neck or put a hole in their head or slash open their arm or their side or break their knees with your blunt weapon. There's a lot of different options here and it looks great the whole way through. One of the final things I want to talk about is the game's performance, because due to the launch time of over 10 years at this point, I want to talk about the bugs and the glitches. So I did not have any hard crashes during my playtime, but there were a couple of bugs. The main one was missions that would not progress due to a lack of specific enemies spawning or weird animations or something like that, causing the game to completely bug out and not progressing the mission. This was fixed by just simply restarting the game after realizing what was wrong, but it could be annoying if you get this problem more often and at more difficult sections and on different difficulties. So, that being said, I did not really encounter any problems performance-wise with this game. Now, is that props to the game? I mean, I think games should just launch working these days, but also to the point of it was in development for over 10 years, so that puts a large part into the reason why it works, I would tend to assume. Overall, I think the game is exactly what I expected, with a few annoying features here and there, but ultimately balanced out by the fun gameplay and absolutely fantastic gore system. When trying to score something like this, you have to take into account other games within the same zombie genre and how it moves forward zombie games as a whole. So with something like this, you get zombie games all the time. We've played so many zombie games, and unless there's really a huge leap in the technology, there's really no point in making another zombie game. We've seen every iteration of zombie game we're ever going to see at this point. So what does this game provide that's new? Now, A lot of things here have been done before. Like I said, the type of gameplay running around slashing zombies, getting upgrades and crafting parts to make new weapons of the different types of elements to progress through a skill tree, it's all been done here. But the gore system and the elemental stuff within the zombies and the mods really make it interesting and add something at least a little bit different. The lack of story, mediocre side missions, and a short runtime compared to similar games within the same type bring this game down a little bit for me, and that's what puts it at a 7 out of 10. The first Dying Light is a better zombie game overall, but it holds up to the original Dead Island, I would say, and is significantly better than the second Dying Light. We don't talk about that game. While it was interesting to see the game finally release and play out after all these delays and still be good, I'm not sure it was a necessary entry overall in the oversaturated market of zombie games. Now, you guys let me know what you think of the game, if you hate it, love it, if you like the first Dead Island better, if you like Dead Island Riptide better, if you like Dying Light better, 1 or 2, what your favorite zombie game is, and I'll see you guys on the next one.